Imagine you're sitting in a really high-stakes board meeting.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Yeah, right. And a major deal you've been working on for I don't know, 6 months, it just suddenly falls through because of some minor technicality.
Oh, that is absolutely brutal.
It is. But here's the thing. If you were to drop your pen, burst into tears, and just start screaming in frustration right there in the conference room, you would probably be fired by the end of the day.
Yeah, without a doubt, security would be escorting you out.
Exactly. And we call the suppression of that urge, we call it professionalism, we call it maturity.
Right, being an adult.
But the source material we are exploring today for this deep dive, it argues that this so-called maturity,
Yeah.
our ability to completely sever our external behavior from our internal physical reality, it might actually be a profound biological and psychological malfunction.
It had a wild concept to wrap your head around,
Well,
honestly.
it really is. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at a text called The Inner Child as True Self: Wholeness, Healing, and the Return to Original Being.
It's a fantastic read.
It really is. And our mission today is to rescue the concept of the inner child from being dismissed as, just some pop psychology buzzword
Right?
or like an excuse to just avoid adult responsibility.
Which is how it gets used a lot, unfortunately.
So true. But the text argues that reconnecting with this state is the literal key to restoring our nervous systems and unlocking our original undivided selves. So, okay, let's unpack this, because this source material fundamentally flips the script on what it means to actually grow up.
It really does. And to understand how it flips the script, we kind of have to start with the foundational premise of the text. The author calls it an ontological claim.
Which sounds incredibly dense.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like heavy academic jargon.
Yeah.
But it just means they're not using the inner child as a cute metaphor for when you feel playful on a weekend.
Right, like going to an amusement park or something.
Exactly.
Hmm.
They are asserting it as a literal, biological, and spiritual reality. It's the baseline condition of an undivided human being who exists in a state of radical openness.
Radical openness. That phrasing really shifts the perspective for me. It frames the child's state as a feature, not some kind of deficit we have to fix.
Yeah, that's spot on. And the text paints a really vivid picture of this by pointing to infants and toddlers.
Oh, the toddler example's so good.
Right, because when you observe a 2-year-old, they do not perform. They don't strategize.
No PR department in a 2-year-old's brain.
Exactly. They aren't constantly calculating the optics of their behavior to, curate a self-concept that protects them from peer rejection. There is zero gap between what they feel in their physical bodies and what they show to the world.
So it's just pure expression.
Yes. The mechanism there is total, unbroken coherence. Like if they feel grief, their vocal cords, their tear ducts, their posture, it all immediately reflects grief.
And if they're happy, it's the exact same thing.
Right. If they feel delight, their entire nervous system literally physically reverberates with it. The text points out that adults are constantly managing this gap between their internal state and their external expression. But a child has no gap.
They're just living it.
Yeah, they are fully themselves in every single moment, operating without an internal manager.
This really reminds me of the process of writing a novel.
Oh, how so?
Well, you always have that first completely unedited rough draft, and it's raw, right? It goes exactly where the author's uninhibited impulses take it.
Sure, just getting it all out on the page.
Right. But then the editor steps in. The editor trims the edges, makes it acceptable, tells you what society actually wants to read, and we usually think the highly edited version is the final true product.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, but the text sort of begs a question here for you as the reader. Since society absolutely demands that we edit ourselves just to function, because, again, you can't scream in a board meeting isn't returning to this unedited, gapless state, just a regression into primitiveness.
It's a really natural conclusion to jump to. But the text is adamant that this is not a regression.
Okay, so not going backwards.
No, not at all. It is not a primitive phase that needs to be transcended. What's fascinating here is that the text defines this original state not as a temporary developmental milestone that we just leave behind.
So it's still there.
Yes. It defines it as the original, unmediated self that still exists, fully intact, beneath the surface of the adult. To use your analogy, the unedited draft doesn't get thrown in the trash when the final book is published.
Oh, wow. It just gets buried under all those edits.
Precisely. It's still there, word for word, underneath it all.
Okay, so if the inner child is our baseline, our true form, We really have to look at the mechanics of how it gets buried in the first place.
Right, how do the edits happen?
Exactly. Because the source makes it clear that we don't just magically outgrow our authentic selves. Instead, layers of conditioning accumulate over that original self, almost like sediment over millions of years.
That's a great visual.
Yeah, and the text details four primary burial agents that basically force our original self underground. And the first one it highlights is shame.
And the author makes a crucial distinction here between guilt and shame. They identify shame as a total inversion of reality.
Right, because guilt is more about what you do, not who you are.
Exactly. Guilt operates on the level of behavior. So it's like, I did something wrong, like a child spilling milk and realizing they made a mess.
Which is pretty normal.
Right, but shame operates on the level of identity. It's, I am something wrong.
Oh, that's heavy.
It is. When a child's exuberant, authentic, or even needy self is repeatedly met with frustration or disapproval from caregivers, their nervous system actually registers that authenticity as a threat to their survival.
Because they need those caregivers to literally stay alive.
Exactly. Children depend entirely on their caregivers to survive. So shame steps in and teaches them to hide those unedited parts.
And over time, that creates a massive structural shift. The constructed, performing self, the one that knows how to sit quietly and be good, it begins to feel like the real person.
It takes over.
Yeah, and meanwhile, the true original self starts to feel like this dangerous, shameful secret that just has to be managed constantly.
And that management requires an immense amount of biological energy, which leads directly to the second burial agent, which is emotional parentification.
Right, when the roles get reversed.
Basically, yeah. This occurs when a child is implicitly, or sometimes explicitly, expected to regulate their caregiver's emotional state.
Like having to cheer up a depressed parent or walking on eggshells around an angry one.
Yes. A child learns to scan the room, gauge their parents' stress levels, and just suppress their own needs to keep the adult calm. The physiological result is that the child's internal threat response gets wired to someone else's nervous system.
That is so intense. And the text notes that this creates a state of chronic self-abandonment in adulthood.
Which plays out in really specific ways.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. You become hyper attuned to what everyone else in the office or the household needs and completely hypo-attuned to your own inner reality. You can read the room perfectly, but you have no idea what you actually want for dinner.
Exactly. You're completely disconnected from your own desires. But, even if a child escapes severe parentification, they still encounter the third layer of sediment, which is the performance of maturity.
Act your age.
Right. Children are constantly told to act their age or to stop being so sensitive. They quickly learn that emotional expressiveness is a huge social liability.
So they just shut it down.
Yeah, they adopt emotional suppression and stoicism. And the real tragedy outlined in the text is that this suppression becomes so habitual that society mistakes it for genuine character development.
We actually reward it. We're like, oh, look at them. They're such a mature, independent kid.
When really they're just terrified to feel anything out loud.
Right. But even if a child survives that expectation of stoicism, they had a much more insidious wall as they get older. And this is the fourth burial agent, intellectual dominance.
This is a big one.
It is. This is when the mind learns to completely override felt experience. It's the habit of telling yourself, this doesn't make logical sense, I shouldn't feel this way. You use rationality to just talk yourself out of your own physical sensations.
Just intellectualizing everything.
Yeah, but I have to push back on the text here for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
Modern culture heavily praises intellectual dominance. I mean, we pay people six-figure salaries specifically for their ability to detach from their emotions, look at a spreadsheet, and make a cold, rational decision.
That is very true.
Right. Being able to step back from an intense feeling and analyze it objectively is usually celebrated as the absolute peak of adult functioning. So how does the source reconcile our cultural reliance on intellectual dominance with its warning that this disconnects us from reality?
Well, the text doesn't dismiss the utility of rationality entirely. It clarifies that these intellectual capacities and protective layers are necessary survival tools within specific environments.
Like the corporate world.
Right. If you grow up in a chaotic home, or you work in a highly volatile corporate environment, intellectualizing your feelings keeps you employed and safe.
It serves a purpose.
It does. But the key distinction is that these tools are just the architecture built in response to external pressure. They are the building, not the person living inside it.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and when we over-rely on intellectual dominance, we mistake the building for the inhabitant. The original self doesn't vanish. It just goes underground.
Yeah.
And because it is still alive down there, it secretly drives your wound responses, your sudden bouts of burnout, and all your unexplainable relationship patterns from the shadows.
Wow. Okay, so if this suppressed true self is secretly driving the car while the adult intellect thinks it has the steering wheel, we have to figure out how to structurally heal that divide.
We do, yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the text argues that healing is integration, not regression.
Mhm.
Think about a paused file download on a computer.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you have a massive software update running in the background and you pause it halfway through, that data doesn't just disappear. It sits there eating up your RAM.
And slowing everything down.
Exactly. Your computer gets hot, the fans were constantly, every other application lags. The system is basically fighting itself. Expressing a suppressed emotion naturally is just unpausing the download.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Right. You let the feeling run its course, the cycle completes, the file finishes downloading, and suddenly the whole system frees up its bandwidth to run smoothly again.
And that perfectly illustrates the nervous system mechanics the author describes. Because suppressed emotions are not abstract concepts. They are trapped kinetic energy.
Physical energy in the body.
Exactly. When an emotion is blocked by the adult intellect, it becomes a physical reality in the body. It becomes chronic muscle tension, digestive issues, anxiety, inflammation.
Just a biological stress loop that never resolves.
Yes. And the text explains that allowing yourself to feel and express with the uninhibited honesty of a child, like actually trembling when you're afraid, or fully vocalizing grief without trying to make it sound pretty, that restores the nervous system's natural capacity for self-regulation.
Yeah.
The cycle completes.
And once that system stops lagging and starts running smoothly again, the text says two major functions come back online: desire and play.
Two things adults really struggle with.
Totally. Reconnecting with the inner child makes desire legible again. It
Yeah.
becomes this reliable navigational instrument because children haven't learned to distrust their wanting yet, right?
Right.
If they want the red block, they reach for the red block. They don't sit there and calculate if the blue block is a more strategic long-term investment.
No, they just go for it. And play is given equal weight in the text. It highlights play not as, some frivolous luxury, but as a primary somatic mode of knowing.
A way of understanding the world.
Exactly. Mechanically, play is how the human brain rehearses possibilities and explores reality without the biological cost of failure.
Because it's just pretend.
Right. There is no anxiety about an outcome, which means the nervous system remains in a parasympathetic, relaxed state while learning. When adults lose access to play, they lose a fundamental mode of human cognitive operation. They just become rigid.
So if the goal is to integrate all of this desire, play, uninhibited emotion, does the adult intellect just, take a backseat?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the adult self doesn't vanish. It transforms its function.
Okay, how so?
Instead of acting as a strict editor or a warden, the adult intellect becomes the protective, nurturing parent that the inner child never had. The text emphasizes that the most critical need for this original self is not external validation from a boss or a partner.
It's internal.
Exactly. It is safety within the self. You become your own safe harbor. This is the internal analog of secure attachment.
Wow.
Yeah, when your adult self learns to meet your internal child's distress with warmth and curiosity instead of, demands for productivity, it literally restructures your threat response.
But, understanding this theoretically is one thing. Intellectualizing the mechanics of the nervous system is really just another adult management tool.
True. It's very easy to just read about it.
Right. Reading a book about swimming doesn't mean you know how to swim. We need practical pathways to actually inhabit this state. And thankfully, the source material outlines 10 specific pathways to genuinely integrate this orientation.
And the map of orientation begins with identifying the non-verbal voice of the inner child.
Nonverbal, meaning it's not words.
Exactly. This part of you does not speak in adult vocabulary or logical syllogisms. It speaks in sudden, visceral impulses.
Like physical feelings.
Yeah, it's a flash of delight when you see a weird bug on the sidewalk, or a sudden, unexpected hollow feeling in your chest when you see two people hugging on television.
Oh, I've definitely felt that.
We all have. And the practice is to notice these somatic markers, these physical sensations in the body, before you try to translate them into a rational adult narrative.
Just feeling it first. And closely tied to that somatic awareness is the pathway of taking your wants and dislikes seriously, and doing so immediately.
Not second-guessing them.
Exactly. It means noticing the physical sensation of a yes or a no in your gut before the adult filter kicks in to calculate if that boundary is polite or productive.
Which is so hard to do.
It is. But the pathway that requires the most unlearning, at least for me, is the instruction to play without purpose.
Well, that's a tough one.
It's nearly impossible. The text insists we need to engage in activities with zero goal, zero product, and zero social utility.
So no side hustles.
No, it cannot be going for a run to improve your cardiovascular health.
Mhm.
It cannot be painting so you can hang it in your living room or post it online. It has to be purely messing around. And honestly, my adult brain fiercely resists the idea of doing absolutely nothing but playing for 20 minutes.
Why do you think that is?
It just feels terrifying and wasteful. And the text actually calls this specific resistance diagnostic. Why is the adult mind so terrified of just like making silly sounds or looking at clouds?
It feels terrifying because our dominant cultural framework requires a strict hierarchy for industrial productivity.
Everything has to produce something.
Right. The adult world of rationality, emotional management, and measurable output is placed at the absolute top of this hierarchy. While childhood traits like spontaneity, dependence, and aimless wonder, they are pushed to the bottom and labeled as useless.
Wow, yeah.
The text argues that this hierarchy does not describe human flourishing at all. It solely describes what an industrial economy needs to function efficiently.
That is a huge distinction.
So when you play without purpose, you're rebelling against the only value system your adult brain has been taught to respect. The author points out that being moved to tears by a piece of music or needing aimless connection aren't pathologies to be cured.
They're not weaknesses.
No, they are the literal marks of a biological organism that is still actually alive.
That reframes the entire concept of productivity for me. And it also leads to another crucial pathway mentioned in the text, which is locating the wound accurately without dramatizing it.
This is a really delicate balance.
It is. It's about honest historical accounting. It is the practice of looking at your past and saying, my parents loved me, but I was expected to act as a mediator for their marriage, and that terrified me.
So no sugarcoating, but no exaggerating either.
Right. It isn't about wallowing in self-pity or creating a victim narrative. It is simply stating the objective facts of the unedited draft so your nervous system can finally stop pretending it didn't happen.
Which is incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
But as individuals attempt to walk these pathways, the text issues a really significant warning about a modern trap that can derail the entire process.
The performance trap.
Yes, the trap of performance.
So what does this all mean for us in a hyper-connected world? Because if you open any social media platform right now, curated vulnerability and therapy speak are just everywhere.
Oh, it's inescapable.
People are incredibly skilled at performing their healing. They use all the right psychological terms to describe their boundaries and their inner child. How can you, as a listener, know if you are actually making contact with your true self, or if you are just producing this emotionally refined performance of a healing persona for an audience?
It's a great question. And the text provides a very specific physiological marker to differentiate the two. Genuine contact with the inner child is fundamentally unself-conscious.
Unself-conscious.
Right. A child building a sandcastle isn't analyzing themselves from a third-person perspective to see how authentic they look,
Right, they're just building the castle.
Well, exactly. The author notes that a genuine return to this state often triggers a very specific sequence. It starts with a sudden flash of profound embarrassment or exposure, which is immediately followed by an unfamiliar, expansive sense of aliveness.
The embarrassment is the mechanism proving you bypass the editor.
Exactly. The embarrassment occurs because your adult ego recognizes it lost control for a split second. The authentic impulse happened before the adult manager could intervene and curate it for public consumption.
That flash of panic.
Yes. Surviving that little jolt of embarrassment without immediately shutting down, that is the gateway to real presence.
In doing this individual work, it scales up in a massive way. The text asserts that institutions and systems of harm in our society aren't just faceless, abstract entities. They are actively sustained by adults who are operating from unhealed childhood wounds.
This raises an important question regarding systemic harm. Because relational harm, like the passive-aggressive culture in an office, or the need for a manager to compulsively control their employees, or even emotional unavailability in a family, it is rarely a conscious moral failure.
It's a transmitted wound.
Exactly. It is the unhealed sediment of childhood encoded into adult behavior and passed from generation to generation, boss to employee, parent to child.
But when one person does this work, when you allow yourself to survive that flash of embarrassment, unpause the download and integrate your true self, you break the transmission line.
You step out of the cycle.
Right. You physically become less available to participate in and sustain harmful transactional systems. You become capable of building relational fields around yourself where other people feel safe enough to drop their own masks.
It's contagious in the best way.
It really is. It is structural world healing, and it starts entirely inside the bandwidth of your own nervous system.
Which is pretty incredible. And the text concludes by zooming all the way out, offering a summary of what this means on a cosmological dimension.
The really big picture.
Yeah, the biggest. Across various wisdom traditions and contemplative lineages, from mindfulness practices to ancient philosophies, the child archetype doesn't just represent developmental psychology. It represents the eternal, unconditioned self.
The pure source.
Yes. It is the state of consciousness prior to the accumulation of karma, prior to the building of defensive structures, and prior to the adoption of a social identity.
The original gapeless state.
Healing the inner child is, quite literally, a return to source consciousness. The text clarifies that this process is not about building a new, optimized, better version of yourself.
No life hacking here.
No, not at all. It is the recognition of what was always already there. It leaves us with this powerful assurance. The inner child is not something you have to create. It is waiting, it is entirely intact, and it is the most real thing about you.
It completely reframes the work from fixing ourselves to simply uncovering the architecture that's already there.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a vast amount of ground today on this deep dive, from the sediment of adulthood to the biological mechanisms of play, and finally to the cosmological implications of the unconditioned self.
It's a lot to chew on.
It really is.
Well,
And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over this week, building on the concept we discussed earlier: authentic desire as a legible navigational instrument.
oh, this is a great exercise.
Think back to that unedited rough draft we talked about at the very beginning. The one before the editor steps in with the red pen to make it practical and acceptable to society. If your unconditioned self knows instantly what it wants or dislikes before the adult brain steps in to calculate the optics or the long-term ROI, try an experiment.
I love this.
The next time you are faced with a difficult decision this week, before you sit down to make a logical, intellectual pros and cons list, try to notice the very first physical sensation in your body.
Just tune into the physical.
Right. It might be a tightness in your jaw or a sudden lightness in your chest. Before the editor intervenes, what is that unedited original impulse trying to tell you about where you really want to go?
Powerful question.
Until next time, keep diving deep.